Marvel couple, director meets White Queen. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 21. If these mutants chose to adapt their powers when they knew that they were different from other humans, rather than revealing them to outsiders, the results would definitely be different. Originally, Feng still had some good feelings for Professor X in his heart, but after this incident, he almost had no good feelings at all. If it weren't for the many people here, Feng wouldn't have to let him go at all. Anyone who dares to covet the secrets of his heart will not pity to die. Looking at Feng, who had an indifferent expression, Professor X's forehead broke out in a little cold sweat. He didn't think of it. I didn't expect it to turn out like this at all. The reason why he came to this place was to simply meet Feng and see if he could make his mutant feel effective. But now that the goal has been achieved, greater trouble has come. Who would have thought that Feng's body was hiding such a terrifying demon? This is no longer at all in the category of mutants. Professor X doesn't like to have a vendetta with this kind of guy, because with his ability, he can't compete with the other party at all. Unless a proud and cold figure appeared in Professor X's mind. Let the Black Phoenix come and kill Feng. As soon as this thought appeared, Professor X's body tensed. He looked at Feng's figure gradually retreating into the crowd, and finally gave up the idea of continuing to go up to explain. Professor, this guy dares to threaten you, he is impatient. Laser Eyes strained coldly and said. He didn't know what was happening at all, but he could hear Feng's threatening words clearly. You're no match for him, Laser. Professor X shook his head lightly and said, none of us are his opponents, because just now I ventured to use spiritual power to try to invade his mind, but an even more terrifying spiritual force swallowed up all my power, which is a scene I have never seen before. I'm afraid he not a mutant. Hearing this, the expressions of the Laser Eyes and the beast became strange. Not a mutant? So where does he get the power? You can't provoke him without my orders. Professor X sighed and said, I am to blame for this. If it weren't so abrupt, maybe he would choose to join the X-Men. Today's goal is achieved. But the beams also followed. Let's go. Professor X waved his hand, as if he suddenly remembered something, and said, also, pay attention to Magneto. If they set their eyes on Feng, remember to remind Emma. Yes. Laser Eye and Beast nodded at the same time. After entering the VIP room, Feng forgot about what happened just now. The contact with Professor X made him feel a little worse. After all, the uncontrollability of the mutant group is too great, and he doesn't want to fall into the swamp. Oh, Mr. Feng, you are finally here, dash. Just as he was thinking, a familiar voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Feng subconsciously raised his head and saw Natasha wearing an OL skirt walking towards him. Please follow me, Mr. Feng. I would like to introduce you to the major shareholder of this investor, Tony Stark. Feng hesitated, but he didn't expect Tony Stark to really come. He followed Natasha's footsteps and walked to Tony Stark, who was surrounded by a group of upper-class rich women not far away. Ahem. Natasha coughed and shouted, Mr. Stark? Mr. Stark. Tony Stark, who was holding the wine glass, obviously paused, glanced at Natasha, and after seeing her charming figure, squeezed out of the pile of women with a smile, and said, beautiful lady, what can I do for you? Director Feng is here. Natasha smiled at Tony Stark, pointed to Feng behind her, and said, do you want to talk to him? Oh, let me think. Tony Stark glanced Feng up and down, his brows furrowed slightly, and then stretched out, as if pondering in memory, and asked, you? Hiss you. I'm the director of Mission Impossible 123. Feng grinned, he couldn't see that Tony Stark was deliberately pretending not to know himself. Oh. I remember. Tony Stark laughed, hugged Feng, and said, I remember you, your spy movie is simply amazing, exactly in line with my expectations when I was a child. I think this is also the reason why you can come here, right? Don't get me wrong, I don't mean anything else, just want to talk to you briefly. What are you going to make in your next movie? If I am satisfied after listening to it, I may give you more investment, on the basis of the original. Arrogant as always. Of course, Feng will not gaffe in front of Tony Stark, let alone be annoyed by his arrogant tone. After all, this is Tony's innate character. He smiled and said, it's not convenient to reveal. When Tony Stark heard this, his expression became obviously cold, but he quickly resumed his smile, put his arm around Feng's shoulders, and said, hey, buddy, I have an employee who likes your movies, can I ask you for a signed photo for her? If I didn't, she might be mad at me because her nickname was Pepper. Yes, no problem. Feng readily agreed. The two clinked glasses at the wine table and talked for a while, and soon Tony Stark was infected by Feng's language charm, and the two inadvertently became acquainted. After Tony learned that his life might be preserved by Feng in the form of a documentary, his tone was obviously much happier. As a superhero, it's great to be respected or admired. Obviously, Tony didn't know that the reason why Li Feng didn't resist showing favor to him was entirely to use him to make money. Stark Industries, Iron Man himself. These two names, once presented in film and television, Li Feng can create a particularly terrifying income. No one liked to live with money, right? After a few more conversations, Li Feng and Tony exchanged contact information and confirmed the investment. Initial amount, 50 million. This amount of money is not much, but it is also quite a lot, which is enough for Li Feng to do a lot of things. After Tony left, Li Feng chatted with several local investors, and the results were very satisfactory. He glanced at the time and was about to go back when Natasha suddenly put her tender white arm around his shoulder. "I'm in a bit of trouble, boss." "Trouble?" Li Feng frowned, not knowing what trick she was going to do again, so he asked, "What trouble?" Natasha's face was obviously a little nervous, and she stretched out her hand to deliberately hold the corner of her skirt with a fork, leaned into Li Feng's ear, and said with a hot breath, "When I entered the door just now, there were several hooligans staring at me in the alley outside. Can you send me home? I'm afraid of them." "To me." Episode 22. She didn't finish her words, but Li Feng instantly understood the meaning. He sneered. "Are you kidding? A level 10 agent of S.H.I.E.L.D, how many rogues will be afraid? Help me, okay?" Natasha blushed and whispered, "Boss, I'm afraid. Seeing such a mature beauty showing weakness like this, I am afraid that ordinary people have long been unable to stand it." But Li Feng turned a deaf ear, and instead said lightly, "I'll send you out and take a taxi home by yourself." "Well. All right." A flash of loss flashed in Natasha's eyes. It seems that this man is really soft and hard and does not eat. But the words have already been said, and she does not intend to take it back. The two walked out of Stark Building together and came to the side of the road. It is full of office workers who are busy commuting to work, and there are no hooligans at all. Just as Li Feng hesitated whether to expose this woman's trick, a cold wind suddenly came from the alley behind him. "Ugh!" Natasha's screams came. Li Feng subconsciously turned around, and saw a few guys wearing hats, directly covering Natasha's mouth with a black cloth, and dragging her enchanting body into the shadows. Help me. Save." A faint cry for help came from the darkness. Li Feng stayed in place for 2 seconds, then put his hands in his pockets, hummed a song slowly, and turned away. "Hero save beauty? Comes? This trick is simply too corny." He didn't give a damn. But he had only taken 2 steps when his footsteps suddenly stopped, and his eyes suddenly looked at the intersection not far away. There seemed to be a skeleton-shaped, translucent mummy figure, just staring at him. Apocalypse? Li Feng's pupils shrank suddenly. After only a second, the figure disappeared. What's going on? Shouldn't this note Apocalypse still lie in the pyramid? The X-Men plot hasn't all progressed yet, and the guy was released? No, something is wrong. This is not the normal awakening time of the Marvel Universe. Someone must have disturbed the order. Li Feng's face gradually became gloomy. Yes. He finally felt some threat. Normally speaking, after the plot of X-Men, Apocalypse, it is Wolverine 3, a deadly battle, when the entire X-Men group will be destroyed by the terrifying power of the Dark Phoenix, and Uncle Wolf will also fall into death. But now, the game between Magneto and Professor X has not officially happened, and the Apocalypse has been released and has set its sights on Li Feng. This means that the plot of the X-Men has been completely disrupted. Of course, it was not this that made Li Feng feel threatened. Rather, the entire Marvel Universe. What if the plot of the Avengers does not break out according to the original time point? What if that guy who looks like a purple potato comes to Earth early before the Avengers are fully established? At that time, everything will be even worse. So, who is manipulating all this? Changing all that? Li Feng took a deep breath, calmed down, withdrew his hands in his pockets, and walked towards the alley where Natasha was dragged away earlier. Whimpering was still heard in the darkness. Natasha was being tied in midair by a blue light braid, her entire body was suspended, and even her arms were squeezed, and she had no ability to resist at all. At the same time, her face was bitter and seemed to be facing suffocation. In the alley, there were 3 mutants with blue eyes. Roll, far, point. Li Feng walked below the shadows, half of his face reflected the lights on the side of the road, and half of his face was wrapped in darkness. Just like that, gently confided 3 words. "Looking for death, huh? Don't hinder the brothers playing chicks." One of the mutants laughed viciously, but as soon as he finished saying this, his entire body turned into ashes. The other 2 mutants showed panic on their faces and were about to escape, when a blue light flashed in their eyes, and then they rushed towards Li Feng without hesitation. 2 seconds later, Natasha's soft body fell heavily to the ground. And the 3 mutants, without exception, all turned into ashes and scattered with the wind. It's really not gentlemanly. Natasha got up from the ground, patted the dust on her skirt, and looked at Li Feng helplessly. Let's go, stay away from me. Li Feng took out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it gently, leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. Also, go back and tell your boss, Natasha. My bottom line is not as low as you think. I'll be angry if you S.H.I.E.L.D. still don't give up the temptation. The consequences of anger. You just saw that, right? When Natasha heard this, her panicked expression gradually returned to calm. In fact, meeting 3 mutants was not a hopeless situation for a level 10 agent. But since he was recognized by Li Feng, there was no need to continue to pretend to be pitiful. You're much stronger than I thought. Natasha sorted out her clothes, looked into Li Feng's eyes, and said, I'm very interested in you. Do you think I'm the kind of person who can't walk when I see a woman? Li Feng sneered and asked rhetorically, go back and tell Nick Fury, I know what he wants to do, but I'm not interested in it. I have a family, a career, and a wife who looks better than you, and I should be responsible for this, not join some S.H.I.E.L.D. Why? Will you know this? Natasha asked, puzzled. S.H.I.E.L.D. And the American team or something, HUD-. Li Feng smiled, threw the remaining half of the cigarette on the ground and extinguished, dropped a sentence, and left. Be smart, the world is going to change. Looking at Li Feng's figure gradually disappearing into the street, Natasha fell into deep thought. Is the world going to change? This sentence. What is the meaning? Pretend to be a ghost? Natasha took a deep breath, although she somewhat appreciated Li Feng, but years of agent training allowed him to easily control his emotions, so Li Feng's previous heroic rescue did not leave any deep impression on her. All this is just her task. The meeting with the investor ended for a while, and Li Feng also returned to normal life. S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't continue to send people to bother him, so he put more energy into making movies. This state of affairs made him quickly make a name for himself in the high society of Masa, and even had a vague momentum to surpass the reputation of the richest man in Masa. This is not an easy thing for the old man who claims to be self-made. Episode 23, Masa City, top floor of the World Trade Center. Winston, the father of the White Queen, was looking at the tall black man in a leather suit in front of him with trepidation. He took a deep breath and explained, listen, I didn't know you were from S.H.I.E.L.D., but I did what you said. I asked all the members of the Film and Television Association in Masa City to refuse to cooperate with my son-in-law, but I couldn't control the people on the New York side, the son brother named Stark Industries, who brought him a lot of connections. If you want to settle accounts with me because of this matter, it will be irrational. Is that all you can do? The black man was none other than Nick Fury, who put his hands behind his back and said calmly, there's no other way? Oh my God. Winston couldn't help but sigh and said, I'm just the richest man in Masa City, there are more rich people in this world than me, and my connections have no effect on Li Feng. If I force myself to use some unclean means, I will only get into trouble and even make my daughter hate me even more. Enough. Nick Fury raised his hand to interrupt him. You don't have to worry about this, I'm here to find out. Why did your current wife imprison your daughter 8 years ago? This? Winston's face turned ugly. It was a secret, and he didn't know whether to say it or not. S.H.I.E.L.D. has the ability to take responsibility for the answer. If you don't cooperate, the next chat will not be so good. Nick Fury is worthy of being an old fritters, and at a glance he saw the problem, and said lightly, don't worry, our secrecy level is also the strictest in the world. Okay. Winston sat on the chair and sighed, that's right, Hazel, Emma's biological mother, has a mental illness herself, and when she was pregnant with Emma, her condition was even more serious, and I had to choose to send her to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. For this reason, I arranged for many well-known psychiatrists and obstetricians and gynecologists to provide her with excellent treatment on the one hand, and protect the child in her belly on the other. Until the day she gave birth to Emma. The entire hospital ward was blacked out, and then there was a deafening cry in the ward, and several doctors in charge of delivering the baby died mysteriously in just a dozen seconds. In order to cover up the incident, I used my connections to block the news in the first place, and even bought the entire hospital, and concealed all the details. So, after the birth of your daughter, you married a second wife in order to protect your reputation, but because this woman's utilitarian heart was too strong, she often beat Emma and even abused her, causing Emma's mutant gene awakening, and was locked up by your second wife, right? Nick Fury sneered and answered, you're really not a proper father, and you don't even pay attention to this. Winston fell silent and did not retort. For Emma, his father was indeed unqualified. So from childhood to adulthood, he would follow Emma's heart, and he would sneak up on anything she wanted to do, even bad things. But this also created another character of the White Queen. You've inquired about everything you want, let's leave. Winston wiped his face with both hands and said. The mutants of the whole world are waking up one after another. Nick Fury turned around and turned back again. Watch your daughter, don't let her run around, otherwise I can't guarantee that S.H.I.E.L.D will not treat her as an enemy. After walking out of the building, Nick Fury glanced at Natasha, who was standing in the doorway waiting for him, raised his eyes and asked, Failed? Well, he knows my identity. Natasha nodded helplessly and said. Guessed. Nick Fury waved his hand and said, What else did he say? Tell me. Natasha repeatedly Feng's threatening words as they were. The world is changing? Nick Fury frowned and muttered, What does this mean? Director, I think what you should care about the most is not this. Natasha said with a serious expression, I saw Li Feng's killing method in the alley, it was simply too powerful, it was a scene I had never seen before, he waved his hand like that, and the 3 mutants turned into ashes. The existence of this level should be immediately classified by S.H.I.E.L.D as a high danger alert level. Nick Fury was silent for 2 seconds, nodded slightly, and said, I know your concerns, Natasha. For an uncontrollable danger, we at S.H.I.E.L.D must not sit idly by, but I always feel that Li Feng knows too many things and is too mysterious, and we can't fall out with him like this, so what do you want? He is a guy who does not eat oil and salt, soft and hard. Natasha clasped her hands to her chest and said helplessly. I went to his house in person to talk to him. Nick Fury turned around, got in the car, and asked, Do you want to go together? We drove to the city of Massa. No, if his wife misunderstands, he may kill me. Natasha shrugged her shoulders and turned away. Nick Fury smiled helplessly when he heard this. It seems that Li Feng said something that made Natasha uncomfortable. As usual, after returning to his villa in Massa City from New York, Li Feng gave himself a vacation. With the release of Mission Impossible 456, the next thing he has to do is sit and wait for the screening period to end, and then collect the money. As for other film shooting, there is no need to be in such a hurry. He has a bold plan in his head that can double his worth thousands of times, so he must take it one step at a time to ensure that all the process does not miss anything. Of course, a large part of the reason is to accompany his wife, the White Queen. Born in the Marvel Universe, you don't have to be a superhero to save the world, let alone deal with departments like S.H.I.E.L.D, or even worry about making a living. This was something that Li Feng had never thought of. Compared to sitting in a rental house a few months ago and being smashed by the landlord to collect rent, life is now a paradise. Why should he have nothing to do to sacrifice himself for those innocent human beings? No need. It's really unnecessary. Some time ago, after the box office of Mission Impossible 123 arrived, he bought a private jet almost without hesitation, intending to fly around the world with the White Queen during the vacation period. Being bored in the house every day is not such a thing, right? Episode 24. Thinking of this, Li Feng, who was sitting on the sofa, smiled, walked directly into the kitchen, and hugged the White Queen who was cooking into his arms. Why? Cooking too? The White Queen glared at him, trying to struggle. Just when the White Queen's face turned rosy, the doorbell at the door of the villa suddenly rang. Stop. The White Queen gently pushed Li Feng away, her face turned crimson, and said, There are guests coming, go and take a look. Okay. Li Feng scratched the back of his head helplessly, so he had to suppress the anger in his heart and walked out of the living room. When he saw Nick Fury through the garden in the villa, his face darkened. Someone from S.H.I.E.L.D again? This time it's still the director? Mr. Li Feng, I'm very happy. Nick Fury smiled, and just wanted to stretch out his hand, but was directly interrupted by Li Feng. You know, I warned your men. Li Feng put up 2 fingers, sneered, and said, and it was twice, but you didn't listen, what else do you expect? I didn't come to you this time to recruit you. Nick Fury seemed to have already thought of his wording, and he raised his finger and pointed behind him. Look, I didn't bring anyone, including my most powerful men, yes? Li Feng sneered, raised his hand at will, and pinched the void on the right outside the villa. So. A figure wearing a black suit was instantly caught and fell violently to the ground. I still have to eat my wife's cooking, so I won't be accompanied. Li Feng pouted and turned around. Wait! Nick Fury's face was a little embarrassed, but he quickly stopped him and said calmly, Li Feng, you are very powerful, but your strength is not unique in the eyes of my S.H.I.E.L.D. Faced with such strong words, Li Feng's face was a little strange. Threatening Lao Tzu again? Why are people in the Marvel Universe so self-righteous? I have said many times not to provoke myself, why don't I listen? So you're Li Feng's ability, in my eyes, there is no need to recruit. Nick Fury hugged his chest with his hands, stared at Li Feng, and said coldly, "You have to know that there is no powerful person in this world who can resist a country, and I happen to control the security of a country's political leaders. In other words, I can use the power of the state against anyone. You don't want to be enemies with people like me, do you?" Obviously, Nick Fury has already known Li Feng's character and knows that he is a guy who can't get into whale, so he doesn't plan to grind hard bubbles, but directly moves out his chips. In the final analysis, the strength that Li Feng displayed in front of the Aegis situation was not enough to make him feel afraid. That's why he dared to come to the door so boldly and say these words. But actually, Nick Fury doesn't know what happened in the underground world of Masa City for the time being. If he had witnessed that void giant axe descending from the sky, he probably wouldn't have been so bold. Hearing Nick Fury speak in this tone, Li Feng couldn't help but sneer in his heart. Really think of yourself as the leader of the United States? Threaten yourself with the power of one country? Worthy of S.H.I.E.L.D. If it wasn't Nick Fury standing here today, but another inconspicuous S.H.I.E.L.D. member, then Li Feng would not hesitate to crush him into a pool of fragments. But the survival of Nick Fury is a top priority for the entire Marvel world. In addition, Li Feng didn't want to provoke a fishy body, so he said in an indifferent tone, "I'll give you 5 minutes, within 5 minutes, after saying what you want to say, after that, I don't want to see any S.H.I.E.L.D. people appear in front of me, and you don't want me to join S.H.I.E.L.D. For reasons I have already said, I won't say it a second time." He wasn't going to give Nick Fury face at all. Because he didn't want to join S.H.I.E.L.D. at all. It won't be long before he becomes the most famous director in the entire United States, regardless of wealth and connections, unimaginable. Isn't it more comfortable to live your little life at home than to go out and fight with superheroes? If it weren't for S.H.I.E.L.D. who still knew to pay attention to some proportions and didn't disturb his life too much, I'm afraid he would have broken into S.H.I.E.L.D. by now. 5 minutes? That's enough. Nick Fury smiled, took off his sunglasses, and said, "The few mutants you killed in the alley are all non-xenomorphs." Know what it is? Non-xenomutants? Li Feng said lightly, "I haven't heard of it." The so-called non-xenomorph mutant is the kind of mutant who has somehow transitioned from a human to a mutant. Nick Fury said seriously, "They are human beings, but after the infusion of some power, they have the power of mutants, but the price of doing so will cause the cells in their bodies to mutate and self-devour. Generally speaking, the modified non-xenomutants will not live for more than a week." Li Feng frowned, but quickly stretched out again and said lightly, "Oh, what's the matter with me? Don't you think that the mutants that appear around you have suddenly increased?" Nick Fury supported the wall with one hand, approached Li Feng's face, and said, "Masa City is the hardest hit area, and the main target of the hardest hit area is you." Nick Fury noticed Li Feng's micro-expression, so he stopped selling the pass and directly said the key points of the speech. "The main target is me?" As soon as he heard these words, Li Feng's eyes became solemn. Combined with the apocalypse seen not long ago, he seemed to understand something. The time and space of the Marvel world must have changed somewhat, causing people who should not be in this timeline to appear. So, what is the reason for this result? Li Feng began to ponder. Is it because of your own appearance? Or do you say, that guy with the same purple potato as his body has begun to lay out on the earth? Li Feng kept an eye on Nick Fury's words. He didn't want his life and growth route to be destroyed, and with his current ability, it was a difficult thing to deal with those big bosses who rushed from the universe. "Li Feng, you must pay attention." Nick Fury took a deep breath and said, "I want to tell you something. I hope you don't get angry. Your wife, Emma, used to be a member of the X-Men, and also a member of the Magneto camp. Her identity is definitely not as simple as you seem. I suspect that the reason why there are so many non-xenomorph mutants in Masa City is largely related to her." Episode 25. That's why you came to me? Li Feng laughed at this and asked rhetorically, "You want me to help you deal with my wife?" "No, I didn't mean that." Sensing a killing intent rising around him, Nick Fury frowned and shook his head and said, "You should have met Professor X, but you must not have seen Magneto, right?" "Oh, who is it?" Li Feng pretended not to know and didn't care, and asked. "He's a complete badass." Nick Fury explains, "He's also one of the strongest heretics among mutants. He can manipulate anything metal-related in the world, including lead and humans. The appearance of non-xenomutants is largely related to him, and it is now almost certain that you and your wife have been targeted by Magneto. If he wants to slaughter you, it's no different than stepping on an ant." After speaking, Nick Fury stared at Li Feng with a scrutinizing gaze, expecting him to show a little fear or jealousy. And yet, Li Feng, who heard this, not only did his expression not change at all, but there was a hint of ridicule in his eyes. "Magneto, stepping on me is no different from stepping on an ant?" Li Feng couldn't help but want to laugh. If Nick Fury said the words Thanos, Li Feng's body might be tense because of this. But unfortunately, He was talking about Magneto, a mutant. Not long ago, Feng had just destroyed a few mutants, and it was no different from stepping on an ant. Even an alpha-level mutant is actually nothing in front of him. If Magneto really has that little eye, he wants to bring people to trouble himself. One hand pinched to death. Why nonsense? What do you mean by that? Nick Fury was confused by Feng's reaction. Why didn't this guy panic a little bit when he heard the news? Magneto is a level 8 dangerous existence listed by S.H.I.E.L.D. In the period when the Avengers had not fully awakened, any alpha-level mutant was definitely a thorn in the side of S.H.I.E.L.D., and the kind of thorn in the eye that would rather be killed by mistake. Coupled with the fact that mutants have been rampant in the United States for nearly a decade, there is a vague fashion around the world to resist the so-called mutants, and even most media and governments believe that mutants will eventually wage war on ordinary humans, especially the Magneto who has just been locked up and escaped, and the threat to humanity is simply terrifying. Therefore, S.H.I.E.L.D. will be absolutely defensive against mutants. In the past, when Nick Fury found ordinary people, or famous businessmen, political leaders, and told them that they were being targeted by mutants, those people, without exception, would panic and then pray for the protection of S.H.I.E.L.D. and be willing to pay any price for it. That's the most normal reaction, right? Look at this guy named Feng. Not only are you not afraid, but you also have an air of let that Magneto come to me and single me out on his face? If it weren't for Nick Fury's comprehensive investigation of Feng's identity, he would even have to wonder if this guy was with Magneto, and he was not afraid of the other party making trouble. But apparently, this is not the case. Even Nick Fury faintly felt that Feng's tone had a feeling of expecting some friction or collision with Magneto. Did you say? Feng is not afraid of Magneto at all? Or do you say his abilities have surpassed Magneto? Thinking of this, Nick Fury subconsciously shook his palm. As the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., the only 11th level agent, he has experienced more stories than his own age. Feng's reaction at this moment, from a psychological point of view, is completely unafraid of the sky. This is also normal, because Feng does not plan to continue to hide his identity and pretend to be a fool in order to avoid continuing to be found by S.H.I.E.L.D. It seems that you are not worried. Nick Fury took a deep breath and said, I overthought it. No. Feng waved his hand and asked curiously, you have to tell me, why am I being targeted by Magneto, and it is still the main target? In fact, Feng was not worried about who would be targeted. He's just afraid of trouble. Fear of trouble coming to the door. But he is not afraid to solve the trouble. As a veteran Marvel fan, this mindset is a must. After all, in this universe, there are so many filthy things happening in the corners every day, and some will always spread to Feng, the Traverser. It's just that he wants to find out why. It stands to reason that if he has no fame and no status, how can he be targeted by a mutant group? Isn't what they should be doing more to disrupt the world? I don't know about that. Nick Fury shook his head and said, after all, the person who was targeted was not me. But I can tell you some of my guesses. Feng waved his hand and motioned for him to continue. I've received news from East Africa. Nick Fury took a deep breath and said, Magneto showed up over there and killed an entire archaeological team, followed by some followers. They all are mutants who have appeared with your wife before. You mean, Magneto wants to take Emma from me? Feng's expression suddenly became cold. If anyone dared to snatch the White Queen from his side, he would definitely not treat it calmly. After all, he had never tried to use the complete body of the Steppenwolf template. It's speculation, don't get excited. Nick Fury felt the murderous aura in the air, and some cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and he said calmly, secondly, Emma's father, the richest man in Massa City. Hearing this, Feng's brows furrowed deeper. Yes, you must have guessed it. Nick Fury said, the reason why Massa City is the first place in the United States to be chaotic is because this place is the city with the most mutants. If Magneto wants to mess up the whole world, he must gain prestige, or support. The richest man in Massa City happens to be the most suitable person, because in half a year, he will become the chief of Massa City, and then if he can publicly support the mutant change law. Nick Fury didn't continue. In S.H.I.E.L.D. information, Magneto is a very ambitious person. He does not want to destroy human beings simply through power, but wants to make the status of mutants surpass ordinary humans and surpass this world in some way. Therefore, getting the support of big people is an important link. The richest man in Massa is the most suitable candidate. Episode 26. What's more, this guy is also very rich and can fully afford to raise all mutants. As long as Magneto can get the richest man in Massa City, this place will completely fall into the hometown of mutants. Such a grand goal is bound to require a huge layout. You mean, Magneto wants to control Emma through me and further control the richest man in Massa City? Li Feng frowned and instantly grasped the crux of the problem. That's right. Nick Fury nodded and said, in this way, it is most in line with Magneto's way of acting. Even in the Marvel Universe, there is no shortage of villains who coexist with strategy and power. Magneto is one of them. Unlike most impulsives, who only know how to act recklessly. Why are you the main target? Because only by controlling you will Emma listen to Magneto. In this way, the richest man in the city of Massa can only use his prestige to squander it brazenly for the gang of mutants. Once the city of Massa falls into the territory of mutants, then the entire United States will fall into chaos. So, that's what I'm here to remind you for. I hope you will accept the covert protection of S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury said to Li Feng with a serious face. He deliberately used the word protect. It was to gain Li Feng's trust. But obviously, Li Feng did not eat this set. Protection? I don't need your protection. Li Feng said lightly, but the information you provided, I am very interested. It seems that Magneto is indeed ready to attack himself. Then the apocalypse phantom that I saw that night must also be something that this guy made. However, Li Feng still didn't care. With his strength, he would not take a look unless the apocalypse came to him in person. You'll have to think about it. Nick Fury seemed to have expected Li Feng to refuse, and said calmly, I know you don't want to expose your strength, let alone let Emma know your identity. S.H.I.E.L.D. agents can protect you without knowing it. I can guarantee that as long as Magneto approaches 100 meters away from your house, S.H.I.E.L.D. will immediately send someone to intercept it. In addition, on your old father-in-law's side, I will also arrange for human protection. How? After speaking, Nick Fury looked at Li Feng with a confident look and waited for his response. It was the last thing he could think of. If Li Feng agrees, it is equivalent to owing him a favor, and what is the situation of the Earth at that time, this favor can still be used. If Li Feng refused, he certainly wouldn't refuse. No one will refuse, right? Unless Li Feng really planned to drag his family and face Magneto and his subordinates. You know, in order to capture Magneto, S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't know how many agents and special forces died. That's an alpha-level mutant. But, in the next second, what Li Feng said directly made him stay in place. Oh, can you tell me where Magneto is? I asked him for tea and a chat. In the tone, there is both disdain and playfulness. Nick Fury almost didn't slow down. Looking for Magneto for tea? Chat? Are you kidding? What's the difference between this and the rabbit personally sending itself to the tiger's mouth? Ahem, Li Feng, I don't quite understand the way you joke, and I don't want to joke with you. Nick Fury tugged at the corners of his mouth. Obviously, he thought that Li Feng was teasing himself. I'm not kidding you. Li Feng stretched his waist and said in a firm tone, I'm serious. If you know Magneto's whereabouts, tell me as you please. I've been worried about nothing to do lately, is it strange to talk to him? Seeing Li Feng's serious expression, Nick Fury reacted. This guy, no kidding. Phew. Nick Fury took a deep breath and said, I don't know Magneto's whereabouts, and even if I did, I wouldn't tell you for your safety, sounding. Li Feng sneered and said, then let him come to me? I don't need S.H.I.E.L.D. protection, it sounds no different from surveillance. Also, it's better to keep your people 100 meters away from my dacha, otherwise I will regularly clean up the garbage, you know what I mean? Nick Fury looked helpless and sighed in his heart. It actually failed. This is the first time he has failed to recruit in person. However, after at least 2 words, my understanding of Li Feng has deepened a little. Well, I hope you don't do anything to my men, they have no malice. Nick Fury shrugged his shoulders and said, before I say goodbye, I have another secret I want to tell you, why don't you listen to it? Li Feng hugged his chest with both hands, glanced at the time, there was still a minute left, and nodded, say, I have to say that the information provided by Nick Fury is quite useful. At least let him know what has changed in the Marvel Universe recently. It doesn't hurt to listen. This is a report. Nick Fury took out a file bag from his black jacket, handed it to Li Feng, and said, it is a report left by the hospital where Emma was held, and there are some surveillance videos in it, and after identification, we suspect that Emma has a dual personality. Hearing Nick Fury's words, Li Feng's eyes immediately became cold. Nick Fury, I told you that Emma is my anti-scale. If you think you can stir up feelings between us to gain my trust, then I advise you to be the best. There are 9 lives, killing intent emerged. Nick Fury's forehead broke out in cold sweat again. But he still maintained his composure, and his tone trembled slightly. Don't think so, Li Feng, I have no malice, the files are all real, and there is a seal of the hospital below, can you just look at it? Li Feng stared at his eyes for a long time, before opening the file bag and looking up. It is indeed patient information issued by a certain hospital. There is also a picture of Emma as a child. Dual personality? Schizophrenia? Talking to yourself in the mirror a lot? This? Li Feng's brows furrowed, the White Queen had never mentioned it to herself. There is also a video attached to it, I watched it privately, please forgive me for my rashness. Nick Fury said softly, in the video, Emma likes to talk to herself in the mirror, and every time she speaks, her expression will change. If you summarize it in words, one is at a loss, the other is arrogant. In the previous statistics on mutants, nearly 67% of mutants will have mental illness in childhood, and schizophrenia is normal. But Emma's schizophrenia is terrifying, more terrifying than the average person. Episode 27. Hearing these two words, Li Feng's pupils shrank slightly. Horror? Yes. Nick Fury's eyes flashed with horror and said, I don't know what her mutant ability is, but it's obviously related to spirits. According to the hospital's records, every time she talked to herself in the mirror, the entire hospital would sound an ancient fight, as if the ancient gods had descended, and an invisible death oppressive force would make all patients tremble. No mutant has ever had this ability in my memory. Have you seen it? Li Feng did not answer, but fell into deep thought. He and Emma have been through so long, and they have never seen the other side of Nick Fury's mouth. Talking to yourself in the mirror? Another personality? He didn't know any of that. Even Emma never mentioned it. If you haven't seen it, then you have to be careful. I have no ill will towards Emma, but I suspect she may have another self, hiding something you don't know, Nick Fury said softly. Although he didn't say it explicitly, Li Feng could hear that this was a warning to himself. He paused and began to think back to the first time he met Emma. At that time Emma, covered in injuries, after meeting Li Feng, fainted directly and didn't say anything. At that time, Li Feng was very panicked, but he rescued her in time. The two developed feelings and got to know each other. When Li Feng knew that Emma was the White Queen and the daughter of the richest man in Masa City, he felt that his director's road finally had hope. But now that I think about it, there are some doubts. Why does Emma find herself in the vast sea of people? Is it a coincidence? Or space-time disorder? Li Feng gasped in his heart. But soon, he calmed down, picked up the file bag in his hand, and threw it into the air. So, an invisible flame of nothingness instantly burned the file bag to ashes. Nick Fury looked at this scene, and the whole person was stunned. Let's go, Nick Fury. Li Feng waved his hand at him, his tone cold. I will always have faith in Emma, because she is my only wife. Even if she has a split personality, even if she has a dual personality, I believe that she loves me deeply. Even if she makes any mistakes, I will bear it for her. Besides, these are my family affairs, and you are not qualified to manage them. I'll give you 10 seconds to get out of here. The killing intent reappeared. Nick Fury paused, then nodded slightly, turned and left. He has already said everything that should be said. As for whether Li Feng was willing to believe it or not, he couldn't control it. In the conversation between the two, whether it was threats or persuasion, Nick Fury did not fall. He believed that Li Feng could see that he was full of sincerity. Next, it's up to creation. However, what he didn't tell Li Feng was that S.H.I.E.L.D. would definitely not watch Masa City fall into the territory of mutants. Therefore, when necessary, he will definitely choose to become an enemy with Li Feng. It's just that what he doesn't know is that even so, Li Feng doesn't care at all. It's just a shield. If you really want to become an enemy with yourself, then destroy it. In the face of that purple potato monster in the future, won't it be over when he personally replaces the Avengers? Also threaten yourself? In the face of absolute strength, the threat has an egg use. And no matter what kind of disease Emma has, Li Feng will not be defensive against her. The relationship between the two has long laid the foundation. No one can overturn. Finished talking? Who is it? As soon as I walked back to the living room, Emma's gentle voice came into my ears. Li Feng's thoughts swept away, grinned, and said, just sell insurance. Sell insurance? The White Queen was stunned for a moment and frowned. The one who sells insurance still wears sunglasses? I like to pretend in the daylight. Li Feng took it into his arms and said, my dear wife, what did you make delicious? After the two had a good meal, Li Feng drove away from the villa as always, worrying about his career. After the White Queen cleaned up the dining table, she returned to her room, stood in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling mirror, looked at her bumpy figure, and curled the corners of her mouth. The conversation between Li Feng and Nick Fury just now, she heard it clearly. When she heard that Nick Fury took out the so-called file bag and handed it to Li Feng, she almost didn't control herself and rushed out of the villa. But when she heard Li Feng say those touching words, and came back without holding the file bag, the whole person was extremely moved. This is the love she wants. Unconditional trust and support. We all love him, don't we? At this time, the White Queen in the mirror suddenly curled the corners of her mouth and spoke, and seemed to have changed a person. Her expression was cold and arrogant. When are you going to tell him the truth? The White Queen outside the mirror asked, lazily crossed her legs. It's still early. The White Queen in the mirror clasped her hands to her chest and shook her head in response. Although I have sensed that the 9 realms have sent people down to find me, I don't want to be discovered by them. My body is still recovering, and so is my strength, but I don't want to hide it from him. The White Queen outside the mirror pursed her bright red lips and said, if he knew that I still had you in my body, he would be angry. No, he won't. The White Queen in the mirror smiled lightly and shook her head, because he also has something to hide. What's going on? The White Queen outside the mirror was stunned. Of course it's something you and I don't know. The White Emperor in the mirror walked back, admiring himself, and curled the corners of his mouth, but I'm getting more and more interested in him. Then tonight, you take my place? The White Queen outside the mirror smiled and said, how is it, Sister Hela? The White Queen in the mirror had a hint of crimson on her cheeks, and after hesitating for a few seconds, she nodded in agreement. No remorse. The White Queen outside the mirror had a triumphant smile on her face. At the same time, she also quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Since the other self is willing to face Li Feng, the next development will not be so difficult. If Li Feng really separated her because of Nick Fury's words, she would definitely be very sad. In fact, she also thought about directly telling Li Feng about her other identity, but after thinking about it, she still felt that this matter needed to be accepted slowly. After all, that guy called Hela is not an Earthling. However, the White Queen also understood that sooner or later she would leave her body and officially face Li Feng. Episode 28. By that time, what will Li Feng do? Will you choose to love her unconditionally like you do now? The White Queen didn't know, and she didn't have a bottom in her heart. But soon she reacted, this is not a problem she should consider, but Li Feng. And what she needs to do now is to protect Li Feng. Magneto? Mutants? S.H.I.E.L.D? These guys who want to ruin the relationship between me and Li Feng don't even think of escaping. My man, only me. No one wants to take him away. Meanwhile, City of Marsa, Underground World, Headquarters. The Angel and the Griffin were planning how to use their men and industry to make money when 3 figures suddenly walked in from outside the door. The two were about to get angry, but they saw the face of the 3 figures clearly through the light. Instantly, the Angel and the Griffin looked panicked, bent down slightly, and shouted at the same time, "Boss, why are you here?" The person who came was Magneto, the Witch, and the Shockwave Woman. Among them, Magneto's dust servant, dressed in a robe, walked to his seat with a calm face and said, "How is the situation?" The Griffin and the Angel looked at each other, and the former said in horror, "Boss, according to your request, we sent someone to keep an eye on Li Feng and Emma, but neither of them lived for an hour and were destroyed. If we want to force our hands, that guy named Li Feng will definitely not let us go." Magneto's brows furrowed when he heard this. "Boss, you are right, Li Feng is indeed an Omega-level mutant, and his strength is even comparable to yours." Griffin gritted his teeth and looked down to report to Magneto. "Well." Magneto propped his chin and said to himself, Emma, I said why don't you want to come to see me? It turns out that there is such a powerful man around him, no wonder." "Boss, are our plans still being implemented?" The Shockwave girl walked to Magneto's side and leaned over. "Omega-level mutants, only you can handle it yourself." If Li Feng heard their conversation here, he would understand that from the violent takeover of the underground world of Massa City, to the appearance of Griffins and Angels, it was basically Magneto's behind-the-scenes game. And the appearance of Magneto is naturally not much different from the plan mentioned by Nick Fury. The only difference is that Magneto does not intend to make a move on the richest man in Massa City, but recruit Li Feng. Omega-level mutants. Of all the mutants, there are no more than 10 fingers. If the White Queen and Li Feng can be drawn together to his subordinates, then the mutants' plan to ban humans will be easier to implement. This is Magneto's ambition. "I can't shoot." Magneto pondered for a few seconds and said, "If I make a move, the X-Men gang will definitely find me at the first time, which is not very beneficial to us now." "That. Boss, we're going to fix it for a while?" The Witch asked. "Maybe I can go talk to Emma again." "No, there's no need for that." Magneto's eyes were deep, and he played with a square magnet in his hand and said, "Bring Emma to me, I'm going to ask her something." "You mean, abduction?" The Griffin and the Angel looked at each other, and a flash of fear flashed in their eyes. "But we can't deal with that guy named Li Feng." Magneto glanced at the 2 shivering guys faintly, beckoned to the Witch beside him, and said, "Find a way to support that Omega-level mutant named Li Feng, and if you can, create some opportunities to let him sleep with you. Yes. The witch nodded slightly. With her ability to change at will, it should not be difficult to charm Feng. Magneto turned his head to look at the Shockwave girl and ordered, "You take the Nocturnal girl to see Emma, the angel, and the Griffin will answer you. Don't do it when you don't have to. If she is not willing to come, let the apocalypse come forward. Presumably she will not miss such a good opportunity." Got it. The Shockwave woman turned and left. After several people left, a shadow appeared behind Magneto. "You woke me up just to make me your subordinate?" This voice, dry and empty, seemed to come from the desolate times. "No, please wait a little longer, you'll see the scene you want soon." Magneto curled the corners of his mouth and sneered, his eyes full of madness. 9 Realms, Asgard. After regaining Mjolnir's approval, Thor returns to Asgard as the story progresses. After meeting Odin, the father of the so-called Lord of the 9 Realms and King of the Gods, Thor learned a secret from his mouth. This secret is the key to the plot of Thor 2. Loki is a descendant of the Frost Giants. When this secret came out, Asgard changed drastically. The reality gem in the Infinity Stones also appeared in front of Thor and the others. It is worth mentioning that the plot of Thor 2 has not undergone some chaotic changes in time and space like Feng's surroundings on Earth, and it has still entered the progress of the main line. First Loki blackened, then, reality gem, entered Thor's girlfriend's body, and then the two brothers turned against each other. Loki fell into the abyss, life and death unknown. The plot of Thor 2 is also completed. But, Thor, who salted his brother with his own hands, accidentally discovered the secret above the temple of Asgard. Hela, the god of death, turned out to be his sister, and he fought with Odin on the battlefield and fought the current 9 realms. He is also the first heir to the throne of Asgard. This level of merit and honor is a more painful torture for Thor, who has liked to compete since he was a child, than learning that his younger brother is not his parents' biological child. In order to find out why, he lashed out at Odin. But Odin explains nothing, and also reprimands Thor with the majesty of the Lord of the 9 Realms, never to find out Hela's secrets, or he will be expelled from Asgard. But Thor's character is understood by everyone, and he has always been the most reckless person, and instead of listening to his father's warning, he also secretly broke into the Abyss dungeon of Asgard. Here, he met his mother, the goddess of the sky, who was known as the most beautiful carcass in the 9 realms. "Stop here, kid." Frigga looked gentle and blocked Thor's way. "Don't get in my way, mother." Thor waved the Mjolnir in his hand, his eyes were resolute. "I need to see her, only she is the heir to the throne of Asgard, isn't she?" Episode 29. Your father told me that she had escaped from the dungeon. Frigga sighed softly and said, "Hela is the child we picked up from the distant ancient star. She has had great powers since she was a child, and these powers have led to her ambitions becoming stronger and stronger, and your father chose to seal her after unifying the 9 realms. Father took advantage of her and betrayed her, didn't he?" A flash of sadness flashed on Thor's face, and he couldn't help but feel cold about this unmasked sister. Hela unified the 9 realms for Odin and made great achievements, but in the end, he was locked up in a bottomless dungeon because he was too ambitious, and no one could bear this result. That's why we're worried about it. Frigga spoke softly, turned to look at the painting on the wall, and said, "Hela has escaped from Asgard for 8 years, and in these 8 years, Asgard has never found any trace of her. Once she returns with terrifying powers, the 9 realms will fall into turmoil, which is why Odin decided to train you as Thor." Thor was silent for 2 seconds and asked, "Odin wants me to kill her? Call it by name." Frigga turned her head and stared into Thor's eyes, and only nodded after a long moment. "This is your destiny, child. Dealing with your own sister and killing your own brother is the so-called fate?" Thor laughed at himself and glanced at Mjolnir in his hand, his face sad. "Child," Frigga stepped forward, stroked his cheek, and said, "If you want to change all that, go back to Earth." "Go back to Earth?" Thor's brows furrowed slightly, and he asked puzzled, "Why?" "Heimdall told me that the last time Hela used his power was in that small star field on Earth." Frigga said softly, "If you want to find her and meet her without knowing your father, then you can only go to Earth and use the divine power of Mjolnir as attraction to find out where she is. However, you have to remember that if you don't find Hela before Heimdall, then she will be sealed again by Odin. I don't want you to fight your father." "Got it." Thor nodded towards the virtuous mother and quickly turned away. Seeing Thor's figure go farther and farther, Frigga stood in place and shook her head. At this time, Odin, dressed in a robe, walked out of the secret room on the side. He could hear the conversation between the two earlier. Thor, grown up too. With a gentle smile on his face, Odin looked in the direction Thor had left. "You asked me to tell him this, for what?" Frigga looked puzzled. Odin shook the scepter in his hand, walked slowly to the wall, stroked the mural on it, and said softly, "Frigga, I have a feeling that the 9 realms seem to be completely in chaos. Chaos? Frigga was slightly pale, she knew that Odin's words could never be wrong. And the limit is coming. Odin closed his eyes, sighed, and said, after living for 1,000,000 years, the 9 realms will finally come to this day. When Frigga heard this, her beautiful and moving face became a little haggard, and after a few seconds of silence, she walked behind Odin and gently pressed it against his spine. Thor is a very powerful kid. Odin held her slender hand and said with a solemn expression, but he can't bear this calamity alone. So, you're going to let Hela assist him? Frigga asked. Nope. Odin shook his head and said, Hela is a great threat to the divine realm, and she must hate me. If I let her return to Asgard, it would still be a disaster. Even if she appeared in front of me again, I would choose to seal her. That. Why let Thor go to Earth? Frigga wondered. To survive. After Odin dropped the words, he turned and walked towards the outside of the dungeon. As the king of war with the most powerful divine power and the most warlike in the entire 9 realms, he will eventually grow old. With the funds of griffins and angels entering the Marvel Studios Company, Limited founded by Feng, all businesses have officially entered an orderly operation state. And Feng, as the only chairman, naturally could not let go of such an opportunity to be a dispenser. After he handed over the rest of the work to the agent, he rushed back to the villa as soon as possible. Today's dusk is particularly dazzling. As soon as he entered the living room, he heard an icy voice in his ears. Still no to come back? What time is it? Hearing this familiar tone, Feng was stunned for a moment. It seems. What's wrong? But I can't say it. He smiled at the White Queen, stepped forward and put his arm around her thin waist, and said, My wife, it's not that I'm too busy with work, but don't worry, I plan to travel tomorrow, just you and me. Travel? The White Queen let out a light and said, Travel is not tourism or something, let's talk about it tomorrow, let's finish tonight's affairs first. Tonight? Feng was stunned for a moment. What's going on? Before the words fell, the White Queen actually grabbed Feng's tie directly and got into the kitchen. After a while, there was an indescribable panting sound throughout the villa. Next. Feng supported his waist and finished the breakfast prepared by the White Queen with a tired face. It's too fierce. It's just too fierce. Since he got married, he has never seen the White Queen so aggressive. It's like changing people. However, this is also very appetizing to Feng. The more cold the woman, the more exciting it is when you conquer her. Thinking of those novel tricks last night, Feng couldn't help but laugh. Such a good wife, not much better than what Natasha? It's really worth $1,000 for the spring festival. After the tea and dinner, Feng changed into a suit and officially set off with the White Queen. Today is much earlier than usual. There is no other reason. Feng has officially taken over the transfer ceremony of the private jet, and the crew is also equipped with 3 civil aviation sisters, and the plane has been delivered to the nearby airport, waiting for him to pick up. It just so happened that Feng also planned to take the White Queen out for a stroll and temporarily stay away from this place in Masa City. After all, if you have money, you always have to experience life and squander it generously. Feng's idea was very simple. Directly hire a captain who could fly an airplane to serve him, and then choose Alaska, a border city that is known as having the most beautiful snowy scenery in the United States. In that place, Feng purchased a private estate in advance, intending to use it exclusively for making aged wine. Episode 30. It's time to take this opportunity to feel the snow in winter. The two quickly arrived at the airport, and after all the boarding procedures were submitted, they finally saw the Boeing 747 that belonged to Feng. The process of waiting for takeoff is relatively long. After all, there are still civil aviation aircraft to operate. Feng took this opportunity to take out his mobile phone and look at the recent news. To his slight surprise, YouTube's headline video cover turned out to be a giant green giant. This giant is full of muscles, wearing a pair of pants, and his face is fierce. Hulk? Feng was stunned for a moment, and then clicked in. In the video, Hulk is smashing and beating on the street, surrounded by a number of tanks and armored vehicles that he directly hammered with his fists, not to mention, there are dozens of mosaic-covered corpses on the scene, and the scene is much bloodier than in the movie. But the strange thing is, the Hulk in the video, his face is unusually calm, it doesn't look like he has lost his mind at all, and he can clearly see a trace of calm emotion from his expression. Why is that? In Feng's impression, every time Hulk got angry, his face was angry. But in the YouTube video, the Hulk clearly looks like he is. Play. Yes. Smashing for pleasure, slaughter for pleasure. Did you say? Professor Banner at this stage can already master the Hulk at will? Feng thought about it and finally rejected the idea. and turned off the phone. At the end of the day, none of this has anything to do with him. Even if Professor Banner can really control the Hulk, the plot will not change in any way. As for the Hulk's harm to humans, it is better to leave it to S.H.I.E.L.D. to deal with. What's more, he also saw the shadow of the military in the video, and it must not be long before the Hulk and Abomination collide, and things will definitely calm down by then. After the plane took off, Feng quickly put the matter of the Hulk behind. At that time, it is better to think about Alaska, how to play with the White Queen. Moreover, it is said that Alaska also has a top-notch delicacy, reindeer meat, which not only provides a lot of nutrition, but even has the effect of abundant, and it is definitely a great thing if the White Queen can eat more. Thinking of this, Feng smiled. Although the figure of the White Queen has exceeded the vast majority of goddess-level tasks, who is afraid of less money and beautiful wives, right? This is also for the sake of everyone's sexual well-being. In the real world, what man is not an old pie? As the plane entered the troposphere, the White Queen's face became significantly happier. She leaned over to Feng's side, pulled open the window baffle, looked at the dazzling sunlight and white clouds outside, hummed a song softly, and asked in a rather expectant tone, "Why did you suddenly think of going to Alaska, Feng thought for a moment and said with a smile, "Because I plan to make a TV series called Breaking Bad, and part of the filming location is here. Of course, the most important reason is to take you around." This pun answer successfully reaped the White Queen's coquettish eyes. What kind of story is that? The White Queen supported her chin, and her eyes gradually became confused. There are a lot of frivolous stories. Feng took her into his arms, but his gaze inadvertently glanced at her neck. There is a mark. It is a triangle, with an erect eye embedded inside. This is... Feng's pupils shrank slightly. This is not... Is there a mark in the Marvel universe that only exists in the God world? What's wrong? The White Queen turned her head abruptly, her beautiful eyes frowning. It's okay. Feng smiled, stretched out his hand, and moved. Nasty. The White Queen glared at him and broke free. Feng took advantage of the gap to get into the cockpit and had a casual conversation with the captain. The feeling of a rich man. That's nice. Although he could fly the plane himself, there was no need for this. Yes, but not necessarily. Why do you have to do things that can be solved with money? 2 hours to go, about to reach the destination, boss. The captain turned his head and smiled slightly at Feng. Wonderful tour, officially started. Just half an hour after Feng left the villa, the White Queen nodded expressionlessly to the security guards, and walked into the villa in front of them. The two security guards were stunned for a moment, looked at each other, and apart from curiosity, did not care too much about why the hostess would go and return. After the White Queen entered the living room, her entire beautiful body began to change, gradually turning into a blue body. What about people? How is there no one? The witch looked around, and was suddenly a little speechless. According to the intelligence, didn't Feng stay in the villa all the time today, and Emma was going to the hospital to take care of her mother? But why? Not a single figure? After waiting for a long time, the witch did not see Feng's figure, so she could only take out the phone and call Magneto. Hey, boss, no one is there. Not there? Yes, neither Emma nor he is there. Then you come back first, good. The plan fell through. Feng, who was spending the Spring Festival moment on the plane, did not know that a conspiracy against him was being carried out. Dayton, suburbs. In a secret laboratory that is hidden. A giant avatar was falling to the ground, wrapping his hands around his neck and constantly making strange shouts. In the corner next to the laboratory, a silhouette wearing a white coat was shivering, looking at all this. A full 10 minutes later, the gigantic green body gradually returned to normal. It was Bruce Banner. He was naked, leaning against the wall with a weak face, his whole face extremely pale. Channing in the corner carefully walked up with a blanket and covered his body, and asked softly, "Professor Banner, the side effects of the drug this time seem to be great, Banner nodded slightly, looking a little lost. "I thought I could suppress the effects of gamma rays with anti-cancer drugs, but I was wrong. Although this drug can make my brain nurse rational, it can make Hulk more excited. This is not the result I want to see, we have to continue to change the formulation of the drug." After that, Banner struggled to get up from the ground, completely ignoring the slipping blanket on his body. When Channing on the side saw this scene, her cheeks couldn't help but turn red, and she quickly turned her head. "Betty, how many other experimental drugs can you get from your father?" Professor Banner asked softly. "I have to get out of here, the Hulk is causing a lot of movement outside, I'm going to go to the city of Massa, it's a messy place for me to hide."